Welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for May 5, 2024. Today we're talking with Ms. Dziunik Aghajanian. Hello, Ms. Aghajanian. Welcome to the show.
Ողջույն.
Բարի երեկո.
Welcome. Hey everyone, before we get going here, let me remind you to support us to help us expand our reach. Go to our donate page, podcasts.groong.org/donate, and consider buying us a coffee. Or better yet, become a sustaining member of Groong with a monthly contribution. We are going to keep going as we have for years, but we are stronger with your support than without. podcasts.groong.org/donate. Thank you, and on with the show. So for the past week and a half, there's been a process of installing border posts in Tavush, which Pashinyan's government is calling border delimitation and demarcation. Every couple of days, government-controlled media were counting up the installation of these posts as a show of a great achievement.
And Asbed, Pashinyan's propaganda is presenting this as a success in negotiations. Pashinyan says that there is some sort of a agreement, but they're not disclosing what that agreement is. And they're calling it also a pilot demarcation delimitation. Opposition, meanwhile, says that a premature piecemeal delimitation of the segments of the border that would hurt Armenia the most is a testament that Armenia is fully succumbing to Azerbaijani demands and strategy, backed by the threat of military force. In fact, Aliyev gloated that I believe it was his idea that to start delimitation and demarcation in Tavush.
Yeah. Meanwhile, many Western countries congratulated Armenia for its decision to give up lands for alleged peace. Congratulations came from all corners of the West, including the United States, the head of the EU itself. Erdogan himself congratulated Pashinyan. I mean, if that's not a red flag for us, I don't know what is. Even Cyprus congratulated this obvious high-stakes, threat-laden bargain. Most of the work seems to be already done. May 15 is the date, that's next Wednesday, by the way, after which the border will be considered, quote, delimited and demarcated, unquote. So the question, can the current process truly be called border delimitation and demarcation, Dziunik?
Well, it is obvious that it has nothing to do with border delimitation, demarcation, because it is going against all procedures widely accepted internationally. And on top of that, there is no understanding of what kind of a map it is using as the basis for delimitation, principles, what is going to happen on the rest of the border, what is going to happen with the rest of the territories that belong to Armenia and are currently under Azerbaijani occupation, as we from the rhetoric of the Azerbaijani leadership, they are not going to release any of those territories. And it becomes obvious that this particular act that is being attempted to be presented to the public as pilot delimitation is actually seizing to the pressure from the Azerbaijani side on the probably some kind of guarantees from the West so that the negotiation process does not fall into pieces immediately, and hope for the so-called peace agreement still stays alive. So this is just a process of giving in against all existing documentation that justifies the belonging of those territories to Armenia, even during the Soviet time. Some clandestine agreement, clandestine process being carried out. And the main purpose of this whole process is simply to keep Armenia on the track of transferring from the Russian umbrella to the Western umbrella to the NATO umbrella. So this is the whole process in a nutshell.
So what's interesting is that this, I don't know if it's like a press release or a communique sent by both sides, says that they will use as a basis for this delimitation and demarcation the Almaty Agreement or the Almaty Declaration. There is an agreement and there is a declaration. And what's interesting is that they'll also put a big disclaimer there that says that the future peace agreement actually may override the principle of the Almaty Declaration. So I don't know how much use that is, but everyone is congratulating Armenia and Azerbaijan for using the Almaty Declaration as a basis. Dziunik, what is wrong with this statement of being based on Almaty? Is that a problem, or why is everyone excited about it?
Well, first of all, it's not everyone, it's just the Western countries. And the thing is that Almaty Declaration was brought to table simply to get some kind of a formal or legal justification for delimiting the border according to the previously existing borders within the Soviet Union. But the Almaty Declaration itself has no legal background for that. The protocol attached to Almaty Declaration has a clause which states that all the Soviet republics actually separate from the Soviet Union with the existing borders. So this is the phrase being used, existing borders. And there is no map or there is no mentioning of any administrative borders within the Soviet Union or any other kind of formal explanation of what kind of a border is being used. And simply because there is no other legal document that they could refer to, they decided to go with this Almaty Declaration. But the thing with this Almaty Declaration is that Azerbaijan attempted to bring this within the discussion of the Kosovo independence to the International Court of Justice, and the International Court of Justice rejected all the attempts of Azerbaijan to justify its territorial integrity based on this declaration, because the declaration or the protocol attached to this declaration has no reference to such understanding. The other issue is that when Armenia signed the declaration and then ratified, it had 10 reservations while ratifying the protocol, and those reservations referred also to Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. So that the declaration or any other clause could not impede the self-determination and the determination of the Nagorno-Karabakh people, and it has no reference to Azerbaijani Republic. So this particular thing is being overridden. Nobody mentions that. And the thing is that during the 6th of October 2022 Prague statement that it was made, Almaty Declaration was brought about in order to justify Azerbaijani territorial integrity and Nagorno-Karabakh within the Azerbaijani Republic. So this was the first step. And then Azerbaijan kind of went back on its own words. And for 2 years, the Western countries were attempting to bring Azerbaijan back to Almaty Declaration reference, which would mean that it accepts Armenia's territorial integrity and pronounce the exact number within which it accepts Armenia as a republic. So this has never happened, and it will not happen because Azerbaijan is not interested in it. And the Western countries were happy to greet everybody that Azerbaijan apparently within the Delimitation Commission agreed to Almaty Declaration as the reference for the border delimitation. The other issue is that Azerbaijani Republic in its Declaration of Independence refers to a succession to the First Republic. It doesn't accept the succession to the Soviet Azerbaijani Republic. And in that reference, Nagorno-Karabakh was not part of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan was not recognized as a state, and apparently it was rejected by the League of Nations as independent state, exactly because it claimed territories which it had no control of. And so this is the problem with the Almaty Declaration, but as there is no other legal reference that the Western countries could come up with in order to justify Nagorno-Karabakh being part of Azerbaijan and delimiting Armenia's and Azerbaijani borders somehow on the basis of some kind of an existing legal framework, they decided to refer to Almaty Declaration and the protocol attached to that, which has nothing to do with the actual things going on the ground.
Understanding that really what matters here is the law of the jungle. Whoever has the biggest army is what's going on. When you say that the Almaty Declaration was referring to existing borders, are those the existing borders of 1991, the fall of the Soviet Union, or is it at the time of the country joining the Almaty Declaration? Because as you know, Azerbaijan joined in 1994, and Nagorno-Karabakh was absolutely not part of that.
The thing is that neither the declaration nor the protocol does not give any reference to that. And that's another issue, that this has to be the agreement between the two republics and the task of the Delimitation Commission to understand on the basis of which maps or which time the border delimitation could be carried out. But the thing is that it is not to the advantage of Azerbaijan to do that. And it has, according to some of our analysts, it has put some more than 30 pieces of maps based on God knows what kind of a legal background those maps have in order to justify its claims over the Armenian territories. The thing is that even during the Soviet time, from the middle of 1970s till 1988, for more than 10 years, the actual border delimitation between the Armenian SSR and the Azerbaijani SSR was carried out. And there are over 190 decisions with the attached maps signed and agreed and stamped on behalf of the leadership of those republics, stating exactly where the border goes, which territory belongs to which republic. These maps are being put aside because that is not to the advantage of Azerbaijan. Yes. It simply wants to kind of prolong the process and meanwhile get as much as possible from Armenia in order to strengthen its own positions on the ground strategically and economically, because currently Azerbaijan attempts to get control of all the water resources that are in that area, also to kind of get hand over the natural resources in those areas. And it actually attempts to implement its dreams about possibly pan-Turkic or pan-Azerbaijani territory, according to which they put different kind of maps even on the presidential website, claiming that their territory is over 100,000 square kilometers. But they do not have any legal background for that, except for their own wishes and the watch list that they present as part of the agreement to continue the negotiations with Armenia and the Western countries, because they have certain expectations from the Azerbaijani side. They are attempting to push the Armenian side to give in and appease Azerbaijani demands in order to keep the negotiation process going and hopefully at a certain point in time to get this terrible peace agreement signed.
And Dziunik, what's fascinating or mind-boggling for me is that there appear to be, as you also alluded to, there appear to be documents, interstate documents between Armenian Soviet Social Republic and Azerbaijani Soviet Social Republic drafted in the 1980s that attempt to delimit and demarcate the border between the two Soviet republics. Now, these were documents that Dziunik Aghajanian, member of parliament from the opposition, was chasing. He alleges that initially these documents were in the possession of the Cadastre Committee, but somehow they were transferred to the Ministry of Defense, and the secrecy of these documents was increased so that not even members of parliament apparently have easy access to this document, and so far they haven't gotten access to it. Why is this being done? And also, do you know any more specifics about what is in these documents that was agreed to in 1980s, and if it contains any better terms or any better results for Armenia, and why the Armenian government is trying to hide these documents, apparently, or allegedly?
These maps are being hidden, and it's not accidental that this group, when it came to power, it dissolved the mapping, all the mapping institutions, and transferred all these documents to different other institutions. And the thing is that 3 copies of the same documents exist both in Armenia, Azerbaijan, and in Moscow. So the original was in the 3 copies each for the countries. And this government, in order to keep this secrecy and go into, I don't know what kind of a clandestine deal, it closed up all these documents that they shouldn't be even considered to be secret documents, because they were decisions agreed upon, maps agreed upon, and at least for the specialists and for the parliamentarians and for the politicians, these documents should be open for review. But they do not do that. Judging upon the copies of the documents that are available and in the hands of the MPs and different analysts, certain parts that are currently being transferred to Azerbaijan are part of Armenian SSR, have been considered to be part of Armenian SSR. Also, judging from the opinions and from the cadastre papers of the residents of these villages, they have been in hold of these possessions even during the Soviet time. So these were part of Armenia during the Soviet time. And now this current government is attempting to transfer it to Azerbaijan. So all these issues are raising questions of the legality of the whole process, the way it is being conducted. It gives rise to suspicions that there is some kind of a mischief or some kind of a plan being implemented in that area. And while understanding why Azerbaijan goes for this kind of actions, because it weakens Armenia and it puts Armenia under total control of Azerbaijan, both militarily and economically, and also it raises security challenges for Armenia, not only for the area that is currently being delimited and demarcated and being presented as a pilot project, but the whole northern part of Armenia. So these kind of questions are being raised, and why Armenian government is doing that at the expense of Armenian people and its security, that these are questions that are not being answered. It's just being thrown under the rug, and the people are being forced into acceptance, and different kind of promises are being made that they will be given some kind of compensation, but you cannot get compensation for your own homeland. This is some kind of a understanding that doesn't get into the minds of the people sitting in the government position.
So Pashinyan is actually claiming that this process is giving Armenia, quote unquote, legitimacy, even in the face of traditional pro-Pashinyan civic groups that have started denouncing that these unilateral concessions are unconstitutional and dangerous to national security. So what is this legitimacy that Pashinyan is talking about?
Well, this legitimacy is the same thing as the cadastre papers that he was referring to. And he is simply asking for legitimacy from our enemies, which is very questionable. Armenia has always had legitimacy. Armenia was the country that was recognized by the League of Nations. Afterwards, it joined the Soviet Union, and it had its own borders, and all the papers, besides historically being part of Armenia, these parts were administratively part of Armenian SSR, and the Armenian Third Republic actually considered itself successor of the Armenian SSR, unlike Azerbaijani SSR. So this continuity of the legitimacy was there the whole time. No one can question it, and no one ever questioned it. Also, this current government is trying to attempt to present Armenia as some kind of a aggressor state, which Armenia has never been considered in the international community. It's the other way. Azerbaijan has always been considered as the aggressor, and all the military actions and all the wars that have been going on this Armenia-Azerbaijani line or in Nagorno-Karabakh have always been initiated by Azerbaijan. So these are things that this current leadership is trying to force into the minds of people in order to get their agreement for the concessions that they are making to Azerbaijan without any legal, historical, political, or military grounds. So these are things that are raising big questions on the actual project that it is implementing and the final purpose of this project. What are the aims and goals of this project? Whether the goal is to weaken Armenia to the extent that it would agree to become part of Azerbaijan, or to put it under mercy of Turkey or Azerbaijan in order to exist as a state, even in that kind of a condition. So these are questions that are being raised by the people, and the people definitely do not agree to this kind of policy, which does not correspond to either our wishes or the actual legal or historical framework that Armenia or Armenians have existed on their own homeland, and all the aspirations that the people have.
Dziunik, Azerbaijan basically has put forth new demands and reiterated previous demands against Armenia, including changes to the Armenian constitution, changes to Armenian national symbols to remove specifically reference to Mount Ararat, as if Azerbaijan has anything to do with Mount Ararat. And even we heard more discussion about the so-called Zangezur corridor. So you have a rich history working in the foreign ministry. What surprises me is that normally, foreign ministries are very quick to respond to any threats or any violation of territorial integrity of a state. But we haven't heard the Armenian foreign ministry respond to any of these threats from Azerbaijan, specifically about changing the constitution. Under what conditions, is it okay to not do that? Why is the Armenian foreign ministry, why is the Armenian government silent when the neighboring state says that you must change your constitution?
Well, there was a very weak attempt some time ago from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to say that it is our internal affairs and no one can interfere into that. But the thing is that my understanding of the situation is that the person sitting as the prime minister has promised a lot of things and is under pressure from the Western parties and cannot simply get away from his own promises. And this is being presented to the Armenian people in a piecemeal way in order to make it more digestible for them. Because if we go back 2 years or 3 years after the war, we see the already initial signs of these things being presented to the Armenian people, even before the war, before the 44-day war. And at that time, it was simply considered as kind of a wishes from the new government that has come and tries to do something that is new and their understanding of new Armenia. But nowadays, when you go look back, you understand that it was a policy being carried out. Simply at that time, it was impossible to implement it the way they wanted. And the things and the processes postponed it to the present time. Azerbaijan will always present new demands, unacceptable demands, in order to prolong this process. That's the way they are doing in order to get as much as possible from the Armenian side and also from the Western countries, because it is pursuing its own policy of eliminating the whole Armenian presence in this region. That's their ultimate goal, and the current government does not understand it. It thinks that if they fall into the full control of the Western countries, they will be protected from the Turkish or Azerbaijani demands. No Western country can stop that. We know it from history. We know how they go into trading policies with Turkey and Azerbaijan when it's to their own interest. We see nowadays, we saw it during the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh. We saw that Western governments actually closed their eyes and shut their ears in order not to see and not to even mention ethnic cleansing. And nowadays, when we look at the statements that they make, they don't even state forced displacement. They just see the movement or displacement of people, as if the people decided one day just to pack up their suitcases and simply travel to another part of the world. That's something that we see the political expediency, as usual, taking over human rights or freedoms or whatever that the West has claimed so far to be, or democracy or democratic values to be the vanguard of their policies. But we understand very well that it's simply the neo-colonial policies being carried out under the guise of democracy and freedoms. So this is something that this government does not want to accept, but I think it's hurting us very painfully, and the people have understood it. The people have understood, but the government has given many promises, and they simply cannot get away with saying, no, we don't want to fulfill it. That's the way it goes. And in order for us to get out of this vicious circle, they need to go away. They need to resign in order to give the people and the country and the state a chance to survive.
Yeah, Hovik, on my part, regarding the Mount Ararat request from Azerbaijan, it just tells me that these are Turkish demands that are being funneled through the so-called Azeri peace process, because this is the time when they have Armenia on a weakness role, and they're just piping through all those demands. What do you think?
We hear some pieces of these demands from time to time coming from the Turkish side.
Right.
We haven't seen the list, but all the Turkologists give us the understanding that once the Azerbaijani demands are fulfilled, then the kind of a wish list or the laundry list of the Turkish demands will come forward. So this is a process that will never end until all Armenia and Armenians are out of this area and the whole area falls into the control of the Turkish-Azerbaijani tandem.
Yeah, I just wanted to, for our listeners, also say that we know for sure that the remaining areas that were not part of the original 4 villages, those are coming next, because according to Pashinyan, he said that the priority will be given to so-called settlements. And guess what? The enclaves, so-called enclaves, are also considered settlements, and those are coming next. So I'm wondering when that issue will prop up. But there's much more coming down the pipe. We know that, for instance, Zangezur corridor. We know, and many people, I think that if you asked people a year ago whether there would be 0 Armenians in Artsakh in 1 year, no one would believe you.
So, people would think you're crazy.
Yeah, but we know that Azerbaijan also has a big push and big policy for settling and occupying Armenia through its citizens, and it has resources to. The scary thing is, it has resources, and it has opened this Western Azerbaijan TV station now, although the organization existed for a long time. So all of the things are leading in that direction, and it's difficult now to say, how deep this horror is going to go for Armenians if this continues.
Well, I have mentioned it many times that giving in to Azerbaijani demands opens the Pandora's box, and these demands will never end. And they have different ways of attempting to push their policies forward through money laundering, through corruption schemes, through different kind of promises to Western countries, which are eager to get this whole South Caucasus under their control. And they will do everything and close their eyes over all horrible crimes committed against humanity. And for them, it's just a policy that is being pursued. And for Armenia, it's a matter of existence. It's a matter of life and death. The so-called Azerbaijani refugees, it's an artificial issue because these people left Armenia in 1988 during the Soviet time. Or about 85% of these people have either exchanged their houses or apartments or sold them before leaving. And they took all their possessions and left Armenia within 2 weeks' time under the demand from the Azerbaijani SSR leadership at the time in order to put this equation mark between the Armenian refugees that were forced to leave from Sumgait area and from Kirovabad area and other areas of Azerbaijani SSR because of the massacres committed against them. And in order for them to put this sign of equation, they commanded their own people to leave Armenia, and they left on their own without any pressure from Armenian side. And according to the Soviet law, you didn't have any right to ownership of the land. You had only the right to ownership of the house, or even the apartments were given under long-term lease to the population. Nobody had the ownership of that. So once you exchange it or once you sold your house, you could not claim any ownership right. So there is no legal background for these people to come back to Armenia. When the Soviet Union dissolved, according to the agreement between the countries, those that had registration of residence at the time of the dissolution of the Soviet Union were considered citizens of these countries. So the Azerbaijanis did not have the registration for the residence in Armenian SSR. They cannot be considered Armenian citizens. So there are no legal grounds for them. But the thing is that the Western countries, in order to kind of put Armenia under their control, they want to dissolve the demographic situation and bring Azerbaijanis in order to play on the disagreements between the people. The same way as they attempted to return the Meskhetian Turks into the northern bordering areas to Armenia, and Turkey and Azerbaijan very eagerly promoted this idea because their understanding was to build this Turkic band around Armenia, and with the Anaconda policy to squeeze Armenia into agreement of giving up Nagorno-Karabakh. So we see the same policy being carried out in Armenia with the expectation that under the guise of human rights or the right of return, these people will be brought back to Armenia, and they have some kind of ownership to the land or ownership rights in order to satisfy them. It does not legally, it is baseless. And if we consider politically, this can be considered alongside with Armenians from Baku, from Sumgait, from Kirovabad, or Ganja currently, or other areas of Azerbaijan, except for Nagorno-Karabakh, to return to Azerbaijan. So there is no validity in these claims except for political attempts to kind of mix Armenia demographically to make it more controllable, and to make the possibility of inter-ethnic conflicts or crises to keep it under control. And Azerbaijan president, if you go back some 4 years after the war, it was stating that Armenia is a monoethnic country. It is not democratic, and it has to have other populations. So when we refer to this time, we understand that these kind of agreements were reached already at that time, and nowadays these policies are being pushed forward.
Another thing worth mentioning is that this talk about resettlement is somehow asymmetrical in terms of the incentives, because we don't see too many Armenians who were ethnically cleansed out of Yerevan or Ganzak, out of Baku, out of Sumgait, lining up to go back, even though Aliyev is saying, well, everyone is free to go back. But these people will be going back to a dictatorship that has been recognized as such even by the obvious pro-Western NGOs such as Freedom House. So you would be going back to a dictatorship that is on the bottom of the list of the world's scummiest countries in terms of human rights, populated by people who have been taught to hate and murder you. So that's another conundrum. And Aliyev is using this perfectly in his favor, saying, why are, feel free to come back. And Azerbaijanis also should go back to Armenia, even though their claims are much weaker than Armenians who were expelled from Baku, for example, or Kirovohrad, for example.
No, well, saying and providing conditions for that are two different things.
Right.
Besides the asymmetry, and the asymmetry is also is in the numbers, in the conditions these people left. Unlike Azerbaijanis, Armenians left with bare feet and hardly survived massacres there.
Yeah.
So these are two different things. And
Yes,
I said
yes.
that 85% of the Azerbaijanis that left Armenia have either sold or exchanged their houses or apartments, and the other 15 were given compensation from the Armenian SSR time. Over 70 million rubles at the time, which was an enormous amount, given the fact that most of Azerbaijanis lived in rural areas, unlike Armenians that lived in the central parts of the cities of Baku or other cities. These are different conditions. And if anybody speaks about any kind of return, first, the return of Armenians to their cities should be considered, or compensation for that be provided before any consideration of any return of any Azerbaijani to Armenia could be even put on the table. And I'm not even speaking about Nagorno-Karabakh.
Okay.
And one more thing to add, never in our negotiations to which I was part of or to which I was aware of, never ever there was any discussion of any Azerbaijani coming to Armenia as a refugee or whatever. Never
Right.
ever. Because exactly the mediators and the international community had full understanding that these people left on their own and on their own decision without any pressure or any harassment. And that was a well thought of decision on their behalf, no matter what the consideration was. But that was a well thought of decision on their behalf, and nobody, either from the political leadership or the people of Armenia, ever pushed them to do that. Even I remember at the time, the place where my mother worked, there was a lady of Azerbaijani origin, and she was crying while leaving Armenia. She didn't want to go, but she said that we got orders, we cannot do any other way, we have to leave. And this was the picture all over the country.
Hovik, let's just take a moment here. We'd like to remind everyone to go to our donate page, podcasts.groong.org/donate, and consider buying us a coffee or two, or better yet, become a sustaining member of Groong and give monthly.
We like to believe that we are unique in the category of Armenian podcasts. We digest Armenian news weekly and bring you interesting discussions relevant to it. We've always been a labor of love, and we're not only nonprofit, but we're also non-budget. Just 2 to 3 friends who have committed our lives, time, and effort to understand the world around Armenians and sharing that understanding with you.
Of course, we will continue our work as we always have, but we are stronger with you than without you. Your support will help us expand our reach to more people who are interested in Armenian news and affairs around the world.
So please visit our donate page, podcasts.groong.org/donate, and consider supporting us. Thank you in advance. We appreciate your listening to us and take that trust and your support very seriously.
Thank you.
For those who are just tuning in, we are talking with Ms. Dziunik Aghajanian, Ambassador Dziunik Aghajanian, formerly of the Armenian Foreign Ministry. Now let's move to the popular movements in Tavush and the group of people marching from Tavush to Yerevan due to reach Yerevan on May 9. So the unrest in Tavush has spread, obviously. There are continuing anti-government demonstrations and civil unrest by the local population who are against conceding their homes and villages to the enemy. It's pretty simple. They were holding continuous vigils throughout the province. And the government has dispatched police to disperse these protesters, who were arrested and beaten. And in fact, this dispersion and this increased brutality happened just after Pashinyan held his latest interview on Channel 1 on public TV. And he basically said that, there is no way that this is going to stop and, you just have to deal with it. A key figure in these protests has been Archbishop Bagrat Srbazan, leader of the Diocese of Tavush. And he's definitely a very inspirational figure in the Armenian Church. Can you give us more information, Dziunik, on who Bagrat Srbazan is? Do you have any more information for our listeners?
Well, I know him as probably many others do. I have followed his interviews, and I know him as much as probably any other Armenian living in Armenia does. But the thing is that he's a very honest person, and he has very clear understanding of what is going on, and he's simply doing his work as the pastor of the area and trying to protect his own people from illegal actions being carried out by the government. And as a clergyman of the Armenian Apostolic Church, he represents the kind of clergy that we have seen historically that have stood up for the protection of homeland and for the protection of the values that the Armenian people have lived for centuries and have believed in. The protest itself started as part of attempt to stop this conceding the Armenian territories to our enemies, but the whole understanding there was that it was not a local issue. It refers to the whole state of Armenia, and that's why after the forced attempt to continue on with the delimitation, demarcation process on the ground, they decided to bring the issue to the capital because that's where the solution to the problem could be achieved. You cannot achieve it in the border areas. It has to be achieved in the capital. There is an enormous discontent in the public, enormous discontent with the policies carried out by this government. The people who have ever supported, and also these people in Kirans have also voted in 21, believing the false and fabricated promises from the prime minister that he's not going to do anything wrong to these people, actually lying about his plans and trying to gain support simply by giving as many promises that the people would like to hear. And they are simply disappointed at the way this whole thing is being carried out. And nowadays, they fully understand the horrific plan that is put in front of the Armenian people, and they do not want to lose their homeland. They do not want to lose their homes that their grandparents have lived in and built, their cemeteries. They don't want their children to be raised under the guns of Azerbaijani soldiers, with the understanding that the enemy is just sitting there and watching them and would shoot them at any time that they think it is possible, and with the strategic positions handed over to them in a gold-edged plate. They would do it at any minute that they get their orders. So there is no possibility for any visible peace to be achieved, even under the false depicting of the possible future from the prime minister. Instead of trying to give an understanding of what kind of security protection there would be, he says we will be planting trees so that people cannot see. So this is the way they understand security, that if you close your eyes and you think like you don't see, then you will feel yourself secure, rather than just thinking of how the security of the country could be achieved. If that was the case, I don't know how other countries would build their security, and I don't think that we would have seen several hundred US bases all around the world if that was the way security was achieved.
Indeed. And obviously Pashinyan is trying to phrase this as some kind of a European border where both sides have an inherent interest in peace, where we know that Azerbaijan continues to its militant sort of ideals. Now let me just read a little bit about the biography about Bagrat Srbazan. He was ordained as a celibate priest by the Catholicos of all Armenians in 1995. And it's funny that in the light of this information that is available to everyone, there was fake news that he had two sons and that he had freed his two sons from the army. People in Canada and UK know Bagrat Srbazan very well because he studied in the UK for 2 years and he served in the Armenian church there. And then for a decade, he was the primate of the Diocese of Canada. So that's a very responsible position. And despite spending more than a decade in the West, he's being accused of being a Russian agent. The government has pulled out all the stops in terms of slinging mud at Bagrat Srbazan. I wanted to ask, government-controlled media, Dziunik, essentially have tried to portray Bagrat Srbazan's followers as pro-Russian. Is there any truth to this? And is there any truth to even this allegation that the opposition is trying to hijack this movement and they are pro-Russian? So I'm seeing a lot of attempts to paint this in this West versus Russia context, and somehow Bagrat Srbazan is seen as a pro-Russian entity.
Well, I would correct you that the government is trying to present this as independence or sovereignty versus pro-Russian attitude. Whereas in actuality, it is West versus Russia policy being carried out. The thing is that for the last 3 years, the government has done enormous attempts to create an anti-Russian sentiment in Armenia, using all the instances, justifiably or unjustifiably, to depict Russia as our enemy, as the traitor, as the ally that did not fulfill its responsibilities, as the country that worked with Azerbaijan and Turkey against Armenia, etc., etc., etc. And now it is trying to put Bagrat Srbazan in line with this propaganda, in order to kind of garner the support of the public that is still probably they think supporting them. But the thing is, for the people, it's quite obvious. Either you are for your country or you are against your country. And if you're against your country, you support the current government. If you are for your country, then this government is presenting you as pro-Russian or acting according to the Russian KGB or some other institutions. So this is the simple line being drawn there. They do not want the people to stand up and not feel themselves weak and useless and helpless, as they have been pushed into the minds of people. They have done nothing to recover the army. They have vice versa. They have done everything to depict the army as very weak and incapable of withstanding any kind of aggression from our enemies. And they have depicted Armenians as traitors, as people who do not want to fight for their homeland, or people who were deserting the front line, or who have been actually working as spies for the enemies, with no actual cases supporting these allegations. And now somebody has come up, and the people have garnered around this person that is actually saying, if we want our country, we have to stand for our country. If we want our homeland, we have to do it ourselves. And nobody can tell us, especially the enemy, that we have no right to live in our homeland the way we want to live. And nobody can tell us that you have to give your home to the enemy in order to survive. And these are the simple things that Bagrat Srbazan is bringing up, and this government does not want the people to even believe in.
Well, they're trying to pull every kind of possible punch at them. For example, their propaganda also mentions the separation of church and state and things like that, as if Armenia was the United States.
Well, even the separation of church and state does not say that when your country or the homeland is in danger, the clergymen have no right to stand with the people or lead the people to protect their own homeland.
Absolutely.
The Armenian Apostolic Church has always been in the vanguard of protection of the homeland historically, so that was the case.
Yeah. So Father Bagrat is actually planning to take the protests to Yerevan. I think they're starting right now. There is widespread understanding that Armenia's problems cannot be fixed in Tavush because the culprits, meaning the government, they're in Yerevan. Can you tell us a little bit about what Father Bagrat's strategy is? Is there a plan for when they get to Yerevan? What are they going to do?
Well, I don't know the details of the strategy, but I know that the main purpose is to unify all the opposition, so-called opposition forces, and opposition to the plans of the current government to dissolve the Third Republic. That's the ultimate purpose that this government has, apparently. And to garner the support of both the population, all the political parties that are opposing these plans, all the movements, all the associations, being professional group, etc. In a nutshell, it is the people standing against the government that is actually not working towards supporting the interests and the purposes and the goals of the Armenian people.
Okay, let's say he gets to Yerevan. Is the parliamentary opposition on board and participating?
And, maybe I can add to that as well, before you answer, Dziunik. What I love about Bagrat Srbazan's messaging is that when you see, him walking from Tavush, you don't see any major heads of political parties. So far he has managed, because that has been one of the major concerns. What would the opposition do? And his messaging has been pretty clear that Pashinyan has been proven to be a liar. And he has, even post 2020, in 2021, as you mentioned, Dziunik, he promised people that he would not, he said, I will cut my own hands rather than give any of these villages to Azerbaijan. So it is a very clear message, and I think that resonates. But in order to transpose this movement into a political force, I believe he needs some kind of collaboration from the parliamentary opposition, from the legitimate opposition in the government, and in fact, everyone, essentially a consensus minus one. So how realistic is this scenario, and what advice would you give to the Srbazan if he's listening, or just in general, what should be done to get all of the opposition under one umbrella?
Well, firstly, it's as you correctly mentioned, it's not a political movement; it's a popular movement, and popular in the sense that it has the support of all the strata and the groups and the parties of the political landscape that are not supporting the current government in its either policies or the way it is carrying out these policies. So in that sense, it's a truly popular movement, and I hope that it will definitely garner the support of the majority of the population of Armenia, whether they come out to the streets or they stay at home. It actually does not matter. The pressure from the popular movement will definitely transfer the processes into some kind of a political outcome. That would definitely be the expectation. And at least at this point is to stop the policies being carried out. But if this government goes on with the policies, it has no other way but to go on with the policies, because as I explained, it has promises towards Azerbaijan, Turkey, and the West, and it cannot get away with that. So in that sense, the government has to resign. And once the government resigns, then the political processes would take over. That's the normal way of peaceful transformation that is according to our legal system. That is legally what has to be happening. But in order for that to happen, the pressure from the population needs to be to such extent that the government understands that they cannot just sit in their houses for 2 days and then come out and show themselves as if nothing has happened. So that has to be to the extent that the people sitting in the parliament from the civic contract party, they understand that the time of change has come and they have to act according to the demand of the people of Armenia, which is the actual owner of the land, the owner of the state, and the owner of the constitution. And the constitution demands the popular expectations to be expressed in the political arena, that is the National Assembly. So that is the way the things have to go, in a peaceful way, the way the transfer of the power has been carried out in 2018. So the legal framework has to be preserved. Whether this government will keep its promises of acting according to the wishes and will of people, we will have to see. I don't expect them to do that, but the popular pressure, I think, will be strong enough to make them to go with the right decision and the wishes of the people. As for the political parties, I believe, knowing a lot of them, that they are fully supportive of this popular movement, fully supportive of the fact that this is not a political thing, political movement in that sense, but it has the support, as I said, of all these political parties, all the movements, all the associations, all the people that have expressed their disagreement with the policies carried out by this government.
Okay, let's move on to our final topic. After months of deliberations, the EU states had finally agreed to provide aid to Armenia to support its so-called resilience, specifically from the European Peace Fund. This fund is used to support cases like Ukraine and Moldova to give them non-NATO military aid against Russia. But Hungary blocked the provision of this aid. Without rehashing a lot of history, we all remember that after the brutal axe murder of Hovik Manucharyan during a military training conference in Hungary, his murderer, Ramil Safarov, was convicted and jailed, but 8 years later, Hungary released him back to Azerbaijan, and Aliyev turned him into a national hero. Armenia broke off ties with Hungary until recently when Pashinyan dishonorably reestablished ties. After the reestablishment of these ties, how could Hungary play such favorites, especially when the positive disposition of the other 27 states of the EU are obvious? Is this a failure of Armenian diplomacy, Dziunik?
Well, of course it is a failure of Armenian diplomacy, but also it shows the way that the Turkic states have used its powers against the European Union, and these powers are actually increasing in their scope and scale. The thing is that Hungary has never even expressed any regret over handing over Safarov to Azerbaijan. And we see, as you mentioned, on one side that Hungary is blocking the decision in the European Commission, and on the other side, within the same time frame, we see the visit of Armenian foreign minister to Hungary and decision of opening embassies in each respective countries. I don't understand this kind of disrespectful attitude, and I don't think that this kind of act from the side of Armenian foreign minister will bring up more respect and more beneficial attitude from the Hungarian side towards Armenia. Hungary is part of the Turkic states. It is very good friend of Aliyev and Erdogan. It is manipulating, especially Orban is manipulating very carefully in order to support its own country's interests. The last time during Safarov's release, it got, I think, close to $1 billion in order to do that.
Yeah, I had read about $2 billion.
Promises. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that probably, I'm not, I know it was a huge amount. And this time, I'm sure it is doing the same trading in order to get some benefits, both from Azerbaijan and Turkey, and from the other side to get some concessions from the European Commission. So this is the way Hungary has been acting. It's working as it's acting as like a merchant in this case. Mm-hmm. Let me see what you are giving, and I'll act accordingly. So. And the way Armenia is acting, it's not increasing any kind of beneficial attitude towards my country, regretfully.
So if Viktor Orban continues to be in Aliyev's pockets, can Armenia expect any real assistance from the EU? Because the EU is set up to require unanimous agreement of all 28 states for just about everything, it seems.
Well, first, I don't think that the EU is very much concerned about that, because the amount of money that they have promised, it's nothing.
It's trivial.
In comparison to it's trivial even to the monthly income from Russia. So this is not something that can be even considered as justifying the act. It's just a symbolic gesture from the European Union side, supporting so-called Western direction of the current government. So this is simply to be viewed in this respect. Orban is doing the way he thinks he could benefit most. And I don't think Azerbaijan, he is in the pocket of Azerbaijan. I think both Azerbaijan and Turkey are in pocket of Orban, because he is the one carrying out all these policies, and probably we will learn later on how much was paid for this kind of action. But I don't think this will be successful. I don't think the European Union relies much on this. They know that they will pay Orban a certain amount, the way they did for the concession of Sweden's accession to NATO, and Orban will give his agreement. But that has to come to the time when it will be beneficial for the European Union to present it as another gift to Armenia and to promote Armenia's anti-Russian sentiment. So this is viewed in this particular picture as part of the game being played, and Orban simply plays his own role, and he gets his benefits from all sides.
So is this bureaucracy one of the ways that the EU promises things to countries like Armenia and later on does not come through? I mean, is this a planned or built-in failure within the EU system so that they have all these machines to stop and then continue?
Yes, of course. And we have seen the same promises with 2.6 billion euros that was presented to Armenia some 3 years ago and never actually materialized. The same we have seen in multiple occasions when they promise certain amounts of money for certain projects, and then they drag you demanding certain concessions on certain, keeping that as a carrot dangling in front of your nose in order to get more and more concessions from you. And I'm sure that the change of the foreign policy direction was also carried out with this kind of promises of certain rosy picture and money flowing into the coffers of Armenia, and also the political figures carrying out in their personal budgets. But it will never materialize the way we think or expect it to happen. They will always drag and demand more and more before they release any amount.
So how should Armenia continue relations with Hungary after this blockage?
With this government, we see that they are shaking hands and kissing each other and hugging and giving the understanding to Hungary that you can still treat us disrespectfully and then expect us to behave like a good neighbor.
Mm-hmm. Should we cut off ties again? What is the right thing to do?
Right now?
Well, going forward.
Well,
I mean,
we
don't need to do any knee-jerk reactions.
I cannot expect much from this government, but if that was the government that was acting respectfully, it would definitely at least make a statement condemning this kind of action.
Right. There's been absolutely no echo from this government.
Instead, you see even the visit of the minister was not postponed.
Yeah.
That could have been a sign of discontent. If you did not want to express it in strong terms, you could have at least postponed the visit of the foreign minister, or some kind of another démarche, or at least some kind of an action that would show your discontent over this kind of attitude.
All right. On that, let's just wrap up our topics for the day. Let me ask each of you if there's something on your mind from the past week or two that you want to talk with us. Dziunik, is there something you would like to share with our listeners?
Well, some picture in front of my eyes that reminded me of the regretfully of the pictures from the 1915 genocide, when the forces from the police attacked the people in Kirant. I don't know whether you have seen that picture of the eldest person in the village, Grandma Lena, and she simply
96
fainted.
years old.
Yes, she simply fainted. She was shouting and crying, and she fainted from the pain of the kind of behavior from his own people towards his own, from one Armenian towards another Armenian. And that was really shocking to me, and that reminded me of the period, the pictures that we have seen, the movies that we have seen. But also it looked like the Mother Armenia was shouting and asking people to actually wake up. That was the kind of the voice in my ears. It kind of, the whole country, the land was shouting and saying, just wake up and stand up. That's the time. That's the time. We cannot bear it anymore. It is too painful. It is time for us to protect ourselves. We cannot rely on anybody else.
Yeah.
That was the picture in front of my eyes.
Yeah, those videos are very poignant. Thank you for bringing that. Hovik, what's on your mind? Well,
in 2 days, it will be May 8th. And it is the day that 6 years ago, this government, this regime was elected to power. And, it will forever remain a tragedy, I think, in Armenian history. But what I remember is, I have a habit of monitoring, in fact, not a habit, I meticulously monitor Armenian social media. And I remember when Pashinyan was marching from Gyumri to Yerevan, all of the foreign funded channels were broadcasting this live 24/7. They were, streaming this on multiple different devices. So it was possible to even see 2 different streams, for example, from Azatutsun and so forth. So I'm wondering when Bagrat Srbazan comes to Yerevan, what will be their reaction? That I have no expectation from the funders of these organizations, obviously, but all of the Armenians who hold Armenian citizenship, who call themselves Armenian, who have had a role to play in the coming of this regime to Armenia, must think twice about that role and what they're going to do when the true popular forces, come to Yerevan and the real movement, begins in Yerevan this week.
Thank you, both of you, for your thoughts. Let's leave it there for today. Thank you, Dziunik, for joining the show today.
Thank you, Asbed. Thank you, Hovik.
All right, that was our show recorded on May 6, 2024. We've been talking with Ms. Dziunik Aghajanian, who has served Armenia through the ranks of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and most recently as a diplomat, as Armenia's ambassador to such countries as the Netherlands, Malaysia, and Indonesia. She received her education at Yerevan State University, Columbia University in New York, and Uppsala University in Sweden. I'm Asbed Bedrossian.
And I'm Hovik Manucharyan.
Please find us on social media and follow us everywhere you get your Armenian news. The links are in the show notes. We'll talk to you soon.